You're like, what am I saying?
Yes. Okay.
Where are my
Future,
notes?
Future Skills Academy.
I am Oregon. Yes, I am Oregon.
Creative Leaders Unplugged. Future Skills Academy. Okay. Welcome to another episode of Creative Leaders Unplugged. I'm Morgan here with Arna. Yeah, for a podcast brought to you by Future Skills Academy. Today we're talking to Myriam Hadnes, a facilitator, a
Yes,
creative,
clearly. Yes.
an accidental facilitator. She does a few things accidentally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As most of us do, really. You kind of just somehow you get into a situation, and then after a while, you look around and you go like, "Huh, wait a minute,
Yeah.
how did I end up here?"
I remember being in high school and thinking like, what do I do with my life, right? Who am I going to become, as all high schoolers do? And my dad's an expert in a very niche, very, very, very niche thing. So like in the country, if people know that they need a specialist in this, he's one of the names that comes up.
What
And
is the niche?
the niche is arc flash hazards in manufacturing environments. So if you have
So,
a manufacturing space, you
yeah.
of course need to protect your employees and people from
Hmm.
different types of hazards. And there's so many different types of hazards.
Hmm.
And he obviously and he would go into factories and make sure that they're safe and
Hmm.
provide an engineering plan for the companies to make them safer.
Right.
But somehow along the way, he became a specialist in arc flashes, as where electricity will jump from the machine to the human, which is not good. You don't want to be
No, that happens. Sorry,
It
I'm like,
happens. It shouldn't, but it does.
oh,
And so he became a specialist in this. And I was like, but Dad, how did you know that you wanted to be an arc flash a
it
specialist?
sounds like
And
a
he goes,
superhero. I'm Arc Flash. Arc Flash. You know, this sounds like a job for Arc Flash.
I never thought of it that way.
There he comes.
Ooh, the guy you never want to see. Oh,
Yes. Yeah, the guy you never want to see. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Oh,
And he was, but that was his response. It's like, I never wanted to. I just had a job and I started learning. And next thing I knew, I kind of knew a little bit more than other people. And people
right.
started asking me questions. And then I was an expert.
Yeah, exactly. It
And I
sounds like the
just,
Green Lantern. I don't know if you know your
I do
superheroes.
know my
Yeah.
superheroes.
Okay.
Yes,
It's
yes.
Green Lantern or Arc Flash.
Arc Flash. I think there's a strong case there.
Okay, sorry. That was
Accidental superhero. But anyways, but just that accidentally things happen. And one day you're just, okay, let me
yeah.
do my job. And the next day you're expert in Arc
Yeah.
Flash.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, exactly. Because that means that you also recognize that. You go like, oh, because you can just not see that is happening. That you are being asked
True.
for that, and then you will kind of flow. It's like being, in the flow. And then recognizing that, say, hey, wait a minute, I'm actually an expert in this niche or this specific thing. Like facilitation is a niche, right?
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
I think most people are not facilitators,
I would agree with that. Yeah. Most people don't know what facilitation is.
right? Yeah, exactly. Most people are
Yeah.
not facilitators, and so it is a niche, but it's interesting how you kind of find yourself that you are a facilitator, or you're even interested in a topic, or you kind of like, oh, that's a distinct topic, and it comes with language. All of a sudden
Hmm.
you talk about, oh, it has a name. It's not moderator, it's facilitator. What is that? That's really, really interesting. And your research, obviously,
Yeah.
is it focused specifically on facilitation, because it's also about change. All right.
Yeah.
So
But it's focused specifically on facilitation, but then within a specific context of multi-stakeholders.
right.
So,
But
yeah,
you're facilitating sort of change. As a facilitator, you
absolutely.
facilitate a systemic change or behavioral change
Hmm.
with multi-stakeholder environment, and then yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's also really interesting, because I think a lot of the work facilitators do are within that kind of realm. There are always, there's always a multi-stakeholder environment that's always
Hmm.
there,
Yeah.
and you're asked to, but sometimes you just don't realize that, because you are asked to do a workshop, for instance, right? And you facilitate a workshop and you don't realize that actually you're in this system. And what you're asked to do is actually changing the system a little bit, because you're going to ask people to go from A to B and you're going to guide them through this creative process. But in the end, something else comes out. Something changed,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And that changes the system somehow. And so I think that's such an interesting perspective as a leader, that you as a facilitator, you're not just facilitating a workshop, you are doing something around change. You're a change manager, if you will, which is a maybe
Yes.
a bad word, but that's basically what you're doing. But most facilitators know nothing about change management, the sort of the traditional kind of body of knowledge of change
True.
management. They have no clue about that. It's even a dirty word. It's even a bad thing. Like, manager, change management, that's traditional, old fashioned in a way, but basically that's what you're doing. So so change managers should be facilitators, and facilitators should be change managers. Anyway,
Yeah. Ideally, if you're,
that I think.
yeah. And it's I think it's different too. Like if you're just popping in to host a one-off workshop on, okay, building personas, you can facilitate that. But is ideally, you don't just walk away with a piece of paper, you walk away with something that changes things in the future
Yeah,
as well.
sure, yeah. So Myriam really sparked a lot of things in my head and
Yes.
your head, right? We were like,
Definitely.
because we had a
Definitely.
long conversation. Yeah. So
Yeah. I couldn't
yeah,
believe how long we talked.
yeah, just about facilitation. Yeah. No,
A little
not
bit
just.
about communism, but
And communism. Exactly. Yes, exactly.
yeah, and I think being open and we talk about, yeah, AI and in the future, but I think a lot of it is, just being open, like you said, being open to serendipity and, what does facilitation entail?
Yeah.
So
All right. Yes. Enjoy.
This is very smart to hit record early so that you don't realize so that nobody gets in their podcast voice.
Yeah.
Is this why you're doing this?
No. Yeah. Because we noticed that if we go like, and now I'm going to start recording, everybody goes like, okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
yes, we're recording now. And actually, sometimes the conversation we had before I actually pressed record was so much nicer than the one we had after we pressed record. Anyway,
yeah. And then after you stop recording, then the real juicy bits happen.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
So yeah, and which is something we're going to talk about because you also have a podcast. Yes. And yes, the Workshops Work podcast.
Yes.
Am I right? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because I'm really interested in because I've learned that if you want to promote your podcasts, you have to be on other people's podcasts, and then they invite you to your podcast, and then you talk about the podcast of this other person, and then your audience will kind of listen to it. That sort of. So it's all sales we're doing here, folks. Yes. No, kidding.
News to Myriam. She just found out.
Well, maybe we're just passing our
No,
audience along.
Yeah, exactly. Don't steal my audience.
If you like this podcast, you might also.
You might like, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
I think so, by the way.
and,
I think so.
And I think our podcasts are very complementary. And what I love about your podcast is, that it really focuses on the human side and the stories behind, and that you totally lean into that with curiosity to get to know the humans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's been some podcasts that afterwards Arna and I will reflect and we'll be like, oh, that was brilliant. Such a great conversation. We're like, oh, we didn't even talk about their crowning professional achievement. And I really like that, actually.
Didn't I just write a book? Like, oh,
which is very funny because so I don't do any research about my guests because I'm like, I want to be guided by my curiosity. So, and whatever they bring up, then I dig deeper. And it had happened to me that after I stopped recording and was about to publish the episode, doing a little bit of research, I realized that they were famous for this one thing that we didn't talk a word about. I didn't even ask a question. I didn't know.
Oh, he's the king of Norway.
Huh?
He's the king of Norway. Oh, I didn't. Oh, we didn't mention that.
Honestly, he was probably relieved.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
But in the back of his head, he will go like, he's not asking me about my royal
kingdom
tasks and the things, my kingdom. You haven't
mentioned.
mentioned.
You were so casual.
It was so casual. What's going on? Oh, you're gonna
On the other hand, I then realized, so after coming down my kind of imposter, I'm such a bad podcaster, I realized that whenever I am curious about a person and then I stalk them on all the different podcasts, I quickly get annoyed because they continuously always talk about the same story.
Yes,
And all the hosts ask the same questions about this one thing they are famous for.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, cool. And then they come to my podcast to hear all the other stuff that nobody has known about them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's also, I like that. Yeah. So we had Jean Litka on, so the previous one I published. And so, but she's so, I mean, she's been on so many podcasts and so many, you know, whatever YouTube videos and interviews and what have you. And so she will she has these stories ready. Basically, she tells them at conferences, she tells them at podcasts, etc. So those guests
Pocket
are always,
stories.
yeah, which are, they are interested, they are interesting, and they are, but they're good. That she really thought about it, and she really means them, and they're part of their vision and what she stands for and what she believes in. So you can't really not use them, but they're, but our, I do also try then, and also, you know, Morgan, you know, we will kind of try to go like, yeah, okay, but it's like, you know, to try to kind of, let's go, you know, but why? So, you know, and that's something we try to do, but I also really enjoy a sort of more, so we're not really focused on anything. So we don't really have a specific, I mean, we have a theme of creative leadership. And I believe creative leadership is something new that we, you know, I mean, well, no, we're exploring it. I mean, I have an opinion about it, but we're also exploring it. We're kind of looking at, are there patterns between the people we kind of talk to? And so, and the patterns, you know, they're there, which are really interesting. But so we do need to kind of have some kind of a free flow of conversation without really steering it, you know, because it is a bit of, it's qualitative research.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're biased.
Exactly.
And then you're steering it, and then you have a self-fulfilling prophecy. Do you do research with, do you use the transcript for your research?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we haven't still, I mean, we're like, you know, actually we haven't done anything yet. No,
we're just having fun.
Yes, we do. Yeah, no,
of course. ChatGPT is just writing the thesis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just gotta, one just we're down, we say, hey, ChatGPT, can you just write the book, please? And it goes, bleh. And then it's like, hey, we have a book. Life is so much, I have dyslexia. So if I would have had ChatGPT when I was a teenager, God, it's like, because I, you know, try to get away with I mean, I was like, that would be so amazing. I don't know what would have happened. I think I would have stayed very dumb, because I would not have done anything anymore ever, but I would have been really good in manipulating and using AI. That would be my thing.
And two thoughts come to my mind. My first thought was, yes, we're using ChatGPT mostly for the wrong reasons. And then second thought is, there's so many people who have social dyslexia. I don't know whether this is a concept.
What's this?
Like, that they cannot use appropriate language to address people in a way that the other receive the message well. And ChatGPT is such a good tool also to bridge that.
Yeah.
So social dyslexia, I totally made that up in the moment. So I don't know whether this
I want to have it.
Disclaimer.
I was like,
Disclaimer.
This might fit. But also I've used ChatGPT obviously to write so many emails. But then going back to Miss Lidka's pocket stories, I have my own pocket stories because I know that it works. I know that I've crafted the message to land with people. And okay, I pull out the story of how I moved to the Netherlands. Okay, pull that out of my pocket. And so it's funny that you say it, because it does feel like
and I think you can. Oh, I'm loving that. It's like having two parallel conversations at the same time. So
where are you now?
The pocket story. What I think it is an art to deliver the pocket stories in a way as if they are new and novel and still intriguing. Because I must say that sometimes I have this, I pull out my pocket story and I'm so bored by my own words that I just want to fall asleep or push the fast forward button. And then there's some, you hear them say it for the 10th or 100th time and it's still intriguing.
Yeah.
I like the word. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like a comedian who's polishing their jokes, and you could hear the same joke, but each time it's getting better.
Yes.
Well, it is true. I mean, in a way that is sort of the art of communication, really. If you want to, so I used to work for a design agency, and I was always the one going to clients to basically do pitches and share sort of, you know, whatever we came up with, and then try to sell it to the client. And by, you know, repeating, you know, that often and doing that often, and especially practicing sort of that pitch, you know, you're going to use less words. It's going to be so. And also, if you, so for people who are looking for a new job, for instance, you know, I always say go, and it doesn't matter if you get the job, you know, but you have to have those interviews, have the interviews, right? Because you're going to learn, you're going to listen to, I mean, if you would record them, the first interview you've ever done and the last one you've ever done, if you did like a 20 or I don't know, 100 of them, it's different. It's better. You're going to improve. You're going to leave out a lot of stuff. So it's that iteration and that learning of just do.
Yeah. And then there's another use case of ChatGPT right there to record your whatever you want to deliver and let it be summarized by AI, because I find it fascinating what it picks up sometimes as most important things, apparently. And I think to get this mirror of what is a neutral machine algorithm picking up as a most important thing. So apparently it's something that you have emphasized a lot, or words you have used a lot, or maybe it's even intonation if you're using a voice summary tool. And I'm curious actually whether there is something to take away and to learn from it, because sometimes when I always use nowadays a tool to get the show notes and a summary of the podcast.
Mhm.
And I still pay a copywriter to write the show notes and I do the summaries myself. But it helps me just to get this transcript and to have another point of view. And sometimes I'm just shocked by like, why is all the summary about the kind of 15 minutes blurb at the beginning to warm up, and this one topic we spend some time, but leaving out all the juicy stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. And it's not,
I mean, we've
so
had the same experience. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not perfect. So it's, you know, and which is, but that's the danger of it, because it if you read it, it almost sounds perfect, and you can kind of, and we experimented with sort of having sort of the transcript and then saying, okay, just write a short article based on this transcript, and you get an article that reads really well, and it's very, you know, nicely written, and it's great, and
Doesn't say
you change the
anything.
tone of voice, yeah, and then you go back, was that actually what we talked about? And then
Exactly.
it's like, actually, that's not really the essence of what we talked about, I think. And there's doubt in my head as well. It's like, was it? I don't know anymore. I have to re-listen to it again. Shoot, I would never have written that. But so there's something about it as sort of an experimentation tool. There's something about it as an ideation tool. It's something that is, it kind of, you know, gives you something to think about. You go like, huh, really? But having it as a sort of finished product, you know, you need to be critical. The critical thinking skills, I think,
Yes.
are going to becoming more and more important. And so we are in this stage where we don't have those critical thinking skills yet. So the majority of stuff right now, I think I read it somewhere, like that is posted right now on social media, like on Medium and on LinkedIn, and all these articles are like just this nonsense AI stuff that doesn't really say anything, but it sounds nice, because we're kind of, which is, we can be really critical, but it's also, that's how we kind of play around with it and try it out, and then later, because that's what I do, I go all in. I go like, yeah, this is amazing, and then a couple of weeks later I go like, that was terrible. That was horrible. Like, oh my God.
Disappointed.
Yeah. So what is
And
that all about?
still, I think, just as Morgan said, using it for example, for writing emails. So my idea of the social dyslexia came from an experience where I received an email from a client, and you might relate to the feeling that you get this email and you get so angry and you just want to put your anger somewhere and you want to write this passive aggressive reply. But you're not
never
allowed
experienced anything like this ever. I have.
So
so
right,
what I
dear
did was,
ChatGPT, write me an angry email.
I actually did the opposite. So I did write this passive aggressive, very angry email. And instead of hitting reply, I put it into ChatGPT and said, please rephrase so that it sounds clear and professional, but brings across the point that I want to make.
Yes.
And then it rephrased it. And then I gave a few other pointers to point out that the client was coming from Asia. So I didn't want them to lose face. So it made it even more precise. And this email, I sent it without changing anything to this client and received a reply. Myriam, thank you so much for the constructive feedback. We totally agree. Let's jump on a call and let's do as you suggested. I was like, oh, wow. And I still felt this deep satisfaction of having screamed out my anger into an email. And I think what I learned from this experimentation with AI and ChatGPT is that when we really know what to say, it's amazing because it helps us these last 5 or 10% of polishing it and putting the sentences together and getting the punctuation and the everything right. That's just annoying. But when I tell it exactly what I want to say, it creates this beautiful email. If I don't know what to say, ChatGPT won't tell me.
No, exactly. And that's the point, right? So what do you want? What is what do you want to, what's your vision? What's your story? What's your point? What do you want to, what do you want people to kind of read and experience or feel or whatever? If you don't know that, my only criticism would be that, so for instance, I see things that were created by AI, and it is in a way, sometimes you have to be careful with, if it doesn't cost, so it takes away the sort of the burden or the mundane or the sort of that work that you don't want to do, if sometimes the value is in the work. So, right. So for instance, I've seen posts about, hey, you can create a persona just using ChatGPT. You go like, and I'm thinking the point of making a persona is building empathy.
Yes.
You have to go talk to people. It's a human to human kind of experience that you then maybe you can use, AI, ChatGPT, whatever, to kind of create a nice story, maybe, but you do have to do the work.
Yes.
And it was also, I think it was something which I saw online about music and making songs and writing music. And that's actually the pain of the artist in trying to get this. That's the value of the piece of art. It's not the end result, which is the most interesting part. It's actually it's the path. So there's
the imperfection. I'm thinking of a love letter. So receiving a love letter. So all the little things
Dear
can be in there.
ChatGPT, write me a love letter to my wife.
Exactly. And you can put in everything that stands out for this person that you want to mention. And then it's too polished, it's too perfect that it won't land. And I think the last 5 or 10% are also then in the imperfection of this humanness. Because at the end of the day, it's not the perfection that we value, but it's the effort and the human the care.
Yeah,
the
you
care,
wrote it.
the extra 5%.
And I think if hearing you say this, I'm thinking that the effort is going to be more, the value of effort is going up. So the market value of effort is going to rise because it can be so easy now to write whatever. If you write by hand, so in your own words, that's going to be more valuable now because you don't have to. You can just have it, you have this machine that can do it for you. And the love letter, written by you with your mistake, but you actually did it. You actually, just like the drawing you made with your hand, because it's about the human and the story and the effort, and AI will never have that. And I think that's an interesting change. And I love the fact that AI is kind of messes everything up a little bit. It goes like, I love that because I think as creatives, it's where we go like, that's interesting. What's happened? Chaos. Yay.
And I think it's going to also put an interesting change between art and, either content or design, because all three things are very different, right? And art is coming from a very personal, like expressive, I want to share this feeling or emotion or express a point of view, where sending an email, of course, needs creativity to write, but it is not necessarily art, not always.
Not personal.
I've certainly, my inbox is not art right now, I can tell you that.
Not.
I wish it was.
Not yet,
I wish
not
my
yet.
inbox was art.
Listen, in a 1,000 years' time, they're going to dig up your inbox somewhere in the somewhere, and they go like, "Whoa! Look at what people did! Look at that! Is that what they
Fascinating.
fascinating? They communicated like that. Let's put it into a museum." Yes, Morgan's emails.
Emails.
And
Oh, that would be wild. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah, so art is, and I love that, because art, as you said, we're doing art for ourselves to express something personal. In email is outward focus, so it's to address,
usually to accomplish a means. Let me share this message with you.
And design as well is
to solve a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's outside, not inside.
Yeah.
Well,
correct.
and then you could say, well, because I know designers who have a very specific style. It's very personal, their style. So they're asked for their kind of, style of designing.
And a lot of designers operate in the overlap. Yeah.
And they have to, but if it's not useful, if it's not user-centric, it's not design.
So
or it's
so we'll
art.
we're getting into a sort of a sort of two spaces where if it doesn't have to be personal, so you can see sort of the hand of the master, if you will. It's not a personal thing. It's not someone like the love letter. It needs to be very personal. So there's a kind of a scale, something that really needs to be really personal. You can't leave that to anything else.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't really have to. That email just has to be correct. And you just want the people from a different culture. You don't want to insult them, but you don't really know what the words, the subtleties of it. And it can help you. It doesn't matter if it's your style. It's just you want to get a message across, right? And so the same with design. I think that sometimes it's functional, and the more functional it is, I don't need to see the personal style of the graphic designer who does the traffic signs or something. Who cares? Really, I want that to work, and I want an AI can really be better because it might be smarter in saying, no, actually. If I compare all the data in the world around traffic and signage, this is the better signage. Fine, that's okay. Who cares, right? But then there's this personal, like you might, a specific brand, for instance, that needs a specific feeling, and it works with this famous designer, and that designer, he or she always creates these kind of types of designs because that's sort of part of the personality of that designer, whatever. So I think there's an interesting scale that is that's always been there, by the way, obviously.
It's the same true for leadership. Where leadership, there must be a personal touch to leadership, because at the end of the day, the leader is in service of others, but it's also through their personality and charisma. And then there's very functional leadership, like in the army or in the NASA. And then there's very creative, inspirational leadership.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Is there like a difference between, would that then be management and leadership?
Don't tell those leaders that.
Because I think even a leader in the army, and then I learned from a podcast recently that, a leader and even from my podcast, leader in the Navy SEALs or Air Force is very different from a leader with the troops, kind of.
Okay.
Sure.
So, and still I think you wouldn't call them a micromanager because they cannot be there and tell everyone exactly what to do. So even a functional leader has to be a leader in the sense that they inspire others to do the work instead of doing it themselves.
Yeah, but that's something that sort of has been kind of a shift in leadership, right? So we can, also in armies, if you will, and I have no clue about armies. But what I do know about books, from the books I read, is that also there you need soldiers who think for themselves, and teams that are sort of agile teams. Basically, it's an agile organization. Whereas micromanagers, and that was sort of the criticism right now of the Russian army, for instance, they're full of micromanagers, and that's why so many people get killed, because actually they don't think independently of themselves.
That's why communism hasn't worked. Okay, that's a tangent.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. So that idea of that you need independent thinkers and people who kind of take their own responsibility and their ownership, and yeah, I guess that's and I'm kind of hesitating to go into the sort of the communism thing, because I say that is it really, what is communism really the way we think about it? Russian is, for instance, never really has
It's
been a
more than
communist country.
attention.
Yeah, and China has never been a communist country, because that's not communism, right?
Yes.
That's actually I think the epiphany of communism is everybody owns and has ownership and responsibility for everything, which is really difficult to imagine, but it has nothing to do with having a dictator. That's not communism.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's having a
I agree. That's a conversation for a different podcast, maybe. If you host a podcast, if in the audience someone is hosting a podcast
yeah, exactly.
talking about political system and communism, please invite us.
Yeah, please. We would love that. I have ideas. Yeah.
I'm really regretting sleeping through all of my high school history classes right now.
So yeah, well, get invited to the right podcasts and you'll learn. No, but the thing is that it's about leadership. There is it is leadership. So you have dictators and you have micromanagers, and you have leaders who are creative leaders. And sort of the way I would sort of, I think you can learn from all of them. The right things, wrong things, and some leaders get stuff done that other leaders can't get done. I mean, if you are a sort of like a dictator type of manager, leader, I mean, you can get stuff done that other managers or leaders can't get done. Maybe you could argue, right? But the point is that if you want everyone to kind of be happy and fulfilled, and if you want to be because I can't imagine having a company where, and this is these are true numbers, like 80% of the people in your company are unhappy. It's like, what's going on? That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But we have loads of those those companies, and why do you accept that as a leader? And I think that because we came from this industrial, this is my pocket story, by the way, the industrial revolution.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, disclaimer. No, but we came from the industrial revolution, but we always think that time passes by and 100 years is so long ago, and 200 years ago, it's like that's never even happened. But it's not true. Certain things you remain with us for so long, and so we are still stuck in that system, but we don't want to be. So having sort of these new ways of organizing and the need for new leaders, and leaders who are not managers or micromanagers, if you will, but leaders who can create a space for people so they can have control and they can have ownership. I call them, either creative leaders or facilitative leaderships, because facilitation is that's the leadership quality that we're looking for. And yes, we're getting to
You stole my sentence.
Go.
How dare you?
Say it again.
No, you go.
Thank you. I'm so happy we agree, and I'm not surprised.
I did my research. No, this is really it was my pocket story, but I knew it was going to connect to you. Yeah,
I was, as you spoke, I was thinking several things. One was that while I would still consider a dictator a leader, I would not consider a micromanager a leader. Because a dictator, they are still leading with a strong vision, might not agree with this vision, and they inspire others to do the work for them. We might not agree with the work they inspire them to do, but they do it. Whereas a micromanager is telling everyone exactly what to do and is not leading with a vision.
And they often keep doing it themselves too. Like,
exactly. They end up doing it themselves. And I think a micromanager is inspired by a lack of What is it?
Inspired.
It's limited.
Yeah.
What is the opposite of inspiration? Desperation. It's
desperate for
is lacking self-confidence, actually.
For sure, yeah.
And therefore needs this hold on to control and make so there is this insecurity and driven by fear instead of driven by inspiration. And then I wonder whether the creative or the leadership that is, I think, in our world, aspirational is then the facilitative leadership, because a dictator would not facilitate their leadership, because facilitation then inspires others to own, to have a share in the power, whereas a creative leader, a facilitative leader, is taking space to share space.
Yeah, exactly. I was just trying to think how I would define it. And I was like, it's someone who gets in the way, or, stands up on stage to then get out of the way.
Yeah.
And then at the end, if it's very successful facilitation, everyone is like, look at what we just did. Look at what we just accomplished. But then when it's like, oh, well, okay, how did you experience the facilitation? Okay, yeah, well, we accomplished this, but we couldn't have done it without their contribution.
Yeah. Yeah. And still it needs a leader to lead with a vision, because as beautiful as the idea is that, okay, we all own it and total flat hierarchies, I think maybe I'm surrounded too much with facilitators, which is just like herding cats. At the end, you do need someone who says, okay, and this is how we're going to do it now.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Or who leads with a strong vision.
Yeah, for sure.
Or shared goal, yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily have to be sort of hierarchy. I mean, that's a role. That's a function you have, and you're really good at. You are really good at that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think this is also very cultural. The Dutch hierarchy is very, very flat compared to many countries. So this type of approach, as flat as it is in the Netherlands, wouldn't work in the United States. It's like, at the end of, we all come together, and sure, we can share things together and work together as a team. But at the end of the day, if the guy who's above you on the payroll, if she makes that call, that's what it's going to be, so.
Yeah, there's no argument.
Yeah.
Interesting. Does a dictator breed micromanagers? Does a dictator create micromanagers because you're afraid, because it's driven by fear? So a creative or a facilitative leader will kind of then create more facilitative leaders.
Yeah.
Because it's not driven by fear.
Yeah. Which reminds me of the concept that if you hire A people, they will hire other A people. If you hire B people, they will hire C people.
Yeah. Hire the people that are better than you are.
Exactly. And you have to not fear the competition, but see the quality and aspire quality. So if you hire great people, they will hire even better people. If you hire mediocre people, they will hire worse people, because they're fearing the competition, don't want to be pointed out.
But this is a big, again, this is about leadership again, because I've experienced firsthand and many times over at agencies that founders of agencies, leaders of agencies would hire people who are not as good as they are, because because they didn't want to be challenged. In their minds, they didn't even realize that, by the way. They just felt more comfortable with people who weren't that good as they are.
Yeah.
And the better people they found annoying.
Yeah.
And, right? So, and I've seen that happen. You go like, oh, so
I saw this in academia happen.
Same.
Very dangerous.
It's dangerous. And it's really interesting how that's a typical thing people do. But that also means that you are, so again, you're afraid. There's fear. And that is such a, or maybe it's trust. Maybe it's not fear, but it's also trust. So you really trust others, and you don't even trust yourself.
Trust yourself, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a trust gap. And I think trust is another thing. And as a facilitative leader, you first of all have to trust in your own ability, which is really difficult. Trust that you can be vulnerable. The trust that you don't have to be perfect, right? Trust that you can go like, I don't know. And that because trusting that the others will that it will resonate, because they don't know either. So you have to trust that we all are equal.
Clueless.
And that if you share that, others will go, that's nice, because that gives me the space also not to know and not to be perfect, et cetera, et cetera. But being able to be that vulnerable, that is a lot. You need to trust, and that obviously takes practice as well. You have to kind of all of a sudden go like, oh, wait a minute, me trying to be perfect and the expert, and that's the problem. But letting go, and I think so. It's fear, but it's connected to trust. I think a lack of trust in yourself.
And I would even connect it to psychological safety.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's a term maybe a bit overused, but I think
For a
very
reason.
rarely, often misused or not understood. So this concept of psychological safety, of having a space where we can be vulnerable, and vulnerable being to say that I don't know, being vulnerable to ask a question, to admit,
Yeah.
being
And not
vulnerable to
agree.
share an idea.
And not agree. Be vulnerable.
Yes.
Be open to say, I don't agree. Or
Yeah.
I have a completely different thought. Or I don't
Mhm.
like, I don't feel okay. I don't like this. You know, you know, etc. Right. So because you know, that's what I often have. Like we love doing workshops, for instance, that everybody has fun, it's great, it's yay, and then nothing happens because the
Yeah.
conversation wasn't real.
Yeah.
You know, nobody said, you know, something, you know, we're never going to do anything with this because I know that after this workshop, you know,
Yeah.
you know, we're
Nothing happens anyway.
nothing happens because whatever, right? So that conversation needs to be had as well. And so the psychological safe space is also to have conflict because,
Mhm.
you know, otherwise nothing happens.
Yeah, and what you said about the trust in yourself, or feeling safe yourself, means that you feel safe enough so to stand in that conflict. And I once heard, I think it was Steve and Sarah on my podcast, who said that they have observed that facilitators who have a weird relationship with conflict, so they fear conflict, they tend to have workshops where no conflict occurs. Like, oh, I never have conflict in my workshop. Everything goes down like planned. And yeah, because unconsciously
Yeah.
they avoid that, they don't go there.
Yeah.
And I think leaders who don't trust themselves, or who don't feel confident, don't feel safe, they cannot create the safety for others. Because if I fear that someone will point out that I don't know, if I am insecure, I suffer from severe imposter syndrome, I don't want anyone to ask me a question, because then they will find out. So
Yeah,
whenever someone
exactly.
asks a question, I will go, you should know that. I won't
Yeah.
answer that.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a facilitator, you will kind of try to avoid tension. And so even if you notice that there's some, you know, some disagreement, or there's someone who is really not participating, you know, that makes you nervous, and you kind of want to not pay attention to that, or kind of want to get away with that. You want to go like, oh, I got away with this. You know, there was no fight. But actually it was the fight that's the most important thing that needed to be had.
That's why they hired you in the first place.
Yeah, but you don't know that because they
Yes.
didn't tell you, because they didn't, because the people who hired you, they didn't want to talk about that either. So,
Yeah.
so that's why I always say, you know, the success of any workshop, whatever that means, is the preparation, that you actually know the conflict that's happening with them before you have the workshop. You have to talk to people, you know, have to
Yeah.
talk to them. You go like, you know, because, you know, one of the, I had so many failures. Oh my God. Anyway, but the biggest failures were sometimes you know, I'm not sure if I can blame myself, but sometimes it's just because I didn't know that something was happening. And you know, I remember walking into a room with a co-facilitator, and it was a room full of people, and they were, I heard them talk, and we walked in and they went silent. And there was this tension, and nothing, whatever we did, it just fell flat, and it just didn't work. I was so unhappy. And you know, and at that time in my career, I was like, it's my fault, I did something wrong, they hate me, you know, I knew it. And so, and then later they said, oh yeah, but just before you walked into the room, there were two departments, and they had this big fight, and then you came in, and they said, we'll leave it for later, for after the workshop. All right, let's just do workshop first, and we'll talk. You know, so, and then we came in,
And that's
hello,
so classic.
let's do a game. And they were like, no. And we're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Wow, this says so much about the culture of the organization, or the team, the misconception of workshops.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
I didn't say, so this is what I've learned. So later in my career, I learned to say, hey, hang on, what's going on? I
Yeah.
feel bad energy. Am I the only one? Is it me? And then people go like, oh, thank God you mentioned it, because we
Yeah.
all have it. Oh no, this is happening. Right. And sure, as facilitators, you get into I got into a situation where we did a workshop. It was a big group of people, big company, and just before I wanted to start with a nice little warm up, there was one of the, I don't know how senior he was, but this most senior person in the room. He said, I have an announcement. Can I just have the group for a minute? And he said, oh, by the way, we're having some financial problems with the company, so a lot of the contracts won't kind of, we won't extend them. And
What
and
timing?
so yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, let's do that game. No, let's not do the game. So I couldn't, there was no way. I didn't know. They didn't tell me. I talked to these people. I asked them how you're doing. Often it's also about, expectations, or people expect something different. I did all that. I knew what they expected, and
Mhm.
all the miscommunication that happened. But then that bomb was
I
dropped.
wanted to give you an example of the
Yeah,
miscommunication that has
exactly.
happened.
Boom.
Here
And
is
you're
a
like,
case study.
hello. And I actually flew, I think it was somewhere in the US, and I flew there just for the workshop. It was like, I'm like, how is it
But
possible?
what do you like? Because I haven't, thank God, haven't been in that situation yet. But like, do you give them a break to let them clear their minds, or you just like drag them out of their misery and say, charge
Yeah.
forward?
So first of all, there's a lot of in your head goes, a lot of stuff happens in your head because you
Mhm.
have your plan, and it was an amazing plan, and it was going to work, and you
Mhm.
felt excited about this. You're like, yeah,
Of
this thing.
course.
But you're also, there's tension because you never know is really going to work, because I always
Mhm.
have plan A and plan B.
Yeah.
Plan A
There's
is
always some
what
level
I
of
shared.
improv. Yeah.
Yeah, plan B is what actually going to happen. So we know that it's never what you thought, but I was ready for all that. And then that happens. And then you go like, I still want to, because I had an agreement with the client that the outcome was going to be this or that, and they needed that outcome for the next stage and stuff
Mhm.
like that. So what do I do? Do I have enough confidence in
Mhm.
myself? And also, it's also about what do I think if I was one of the participants, what
Mhm.
would I actually want to happen now? So, but it takes so much, it's actually really stressful, painful, where you go like, so I basically said, okay, stop. We're not going to do the workshop. This is not going to work. It's not going to work. No way. This is not going to work. So we had
Yeah.
2 days. I said, today, maybe tomorrow, but at least this morning, we're going to talk. We're going to do something else. We're going to put you into groups. You're going to talk about this. We're going to share, something. And let's find out what we're going to do these 2 days. We know where we wanted to go. That, you want, because it's not my workshop. It's their
Mhm.
workshop.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not me. It's not my outcome. I don't own it. They own it. So I basically agree with them like, okay, we all know why we're here. We're not going to get there now. Let's spend the morning. Let's see what's going to happen. Let's talk about this, and then we make another plan. Is that okay? And they went, oh yeah, sure. And because they were like, I don't care. Actually, they were like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, because this is like
My
horrible.
contract's
What this guy
done. Yeah.
just said, what's going to happen because we're going to lose people. And so the mood was really down. Anyway,
Mhm. Mhm.
but are you willing to say, stop, let's not do it?
And that's for me where the leadership as a facilitator comes in, because I think many facilitators forget about the leadership role they play.
Mhm.
And in these situations, also to decide whom do I serve? And I would be curious what went through your mind. Are you serving in this moment? Are you serving your hiring client who dropped the message, or are you serving the group?
Yeah, that's the tension, right? Because you go
Mhm.
like, oh, but I was hired, I get paid for
Yeah.
this. So how do I steer the ship that they will get there somehow? Because, and at the same time, it's impossible to get there now anyway. So,
Mhm.
but what about the people in this group?
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have they're not going to give me what I want anyway. No energy,
Mhm.
nothing, right? They're not going to give themselves fully to what I was planning to do. And I had those sessions, by the way, where people went like, because I don't know, there's another story, but people went like, oh, okay, all right, fine. Let's do, what do you want to, what's next? What's next?
Yeah. Yeah.
And because they felt there was some tension in the company and et cetera. But are you willing to at least talk about that? So what you feel as a facilitator, are you willing to say, I feel this, I feel this. okay, and what do you feel? Instead of going like, oh, I feel this and oh, what to do, and keep it all internal, by just
Mhm.
being a reporter and saying, hey, I feel this and I see this. I see this is happening. Observe this is happening. You just got this message. I see you go like, wow, this is terrible, this horrible news, and I feel really awkward about this. I don't think we're going to get it to the end. That's my problem, So can I? But a lot of facilitators feel that they somehow can't share what they feel.
And I wonder whether this comes from a misconception of the neutrality of a facilitator. Or I have to be neutral. I have to guide them through the process.
Yeah, but isn't
And
that being
I think
neutral? Isn't
exactly. And
being, yeah.
I think the neutrality is regarding the outcome. And
Yeah.
in order to get them through the process, it's about pointing out these things and being the channel and saying, okay, this is what I hear. This is what I feel. This is what I see. This is what I think you
Exactly. Yeah.
could and should do or discuss instead.
Yeah.
And I think this is why we're hired, and where many facilitators don't take the opportunity to step into their leadership when being in the space and hired by a client, because they think, oh, I need to be neutral, or they don't dare, or they're waiting for permission. But I
Yeah.
think the moment we're hired to guide such a process, we are given permission, because otherwise there's no point we're there anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And I'm
that's the same
thinking,
with sorry, go ahead, Morgan.
I was going to say, I'm thinking of also, I mean, most of my, I do a decent amount of facilitation, but most of it happens then in the university. So it's with a general specific age range of young students who are learning, a new field. And I had the ability to facilitate both business students, but then also the design students. And I tend to be a bit more open and transparent, like, hey, like stepping in and saying, hey, I'm sensing this tension right now, or hey, you guys told me you'd be at this point in the project, but you're not. What do you think is a great idea? But it was very interesting how the business students responded to this versus the design students, because the design students, if you give it to them more openly and honest, they're like, okay, well, this is where we're at. Let's readjust, and okay, we'll make some adjustments. But the business students lost faith in me. And it was like, no, you're the leader, you're the teacher, you have to tell us exactly what we're going to do and how we're exactly going to get there. And it was, so that was also like a moment for me, like, okay, well, just also carry over then when you're facilitating. I mean, because most of the facilitation that happens within business context, but when you start thinking of multi-stakeholders, you start working with, homeowners or store employees, or, people who aren't necessarily coming from the suits category.
But we all were programmed at school in a certain way. So we expect the person in front of the classroom, if you will, the facilitator, to tell us what to do. And then when you start facilitating and you give the ownership, because it's not about, the worst thing that can happen is that you as a facilitator start owning the content and the outcome, and they don't take any responsibility.
That's how a lot of classes operate. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then they
That's
don't take any
dictatorship or micromanagement.
And some students like that.
Yeah, some students, yeah, they like it, a good dictator. Just tell me what to do, they don't because they don't
I
take
know you like
responsibility.
that.
Yes. Hey, but Myriam, I have a question. So because for me, facilitation and being a facilitator, it just kind of just happened. I didn't, it's been a while, but when I started to call myself a facilitator or talk about facilitation, I mean, that's, for me, it was all new. I didn't even know when once I started doing it, I didn't even know I was doing it. Kind of, I started realizing, I remember telling a colleague, like, I think I'm facilitating or something, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to do that. I was like, I came from design. I came from getting a brief, then having my design team come up with something beautiful and gorgeous and amazing, and then selling it to the client. That it's amazing, the best thing you could ever have, and that's it. And not facilitating with which I absolutely love. And I think it's the best thing that's happened to me. But I didn't really, there was no school or something. I wasn't taught to be a facilitator. I just started doing it. So how did you get into that, and why, when, did you start calling yourself a facilitator or interested in that theme, or when that had happened? What happened?
What happened?
What happened?
In German, there's a phrase that translates something along the lines of, I got to facilitation like the Virgin Mary got to a child.
You have to think about
Unintended,
that one.
unexpected.
Holy inspiration.
It's holy inspiration.
I think I did. So I have a background. So I come from academia. I'm a recovering academic. And I think I started facilitating when I was in the classroom I was teaching economics to Vietnamese students, talking about socialism, communism, and was faced with the challenge that when I asked them the question, where do you think does the price come from? All the hands went up. The government. I'm like, good, we got some work to do. When 2 months later we started the Economics 101 class, I prepared the course, according to the textbook, and then found out that in the meantime, they all have read the textbook.
Oh.
So
Yes.
I was standing there kind of N20s, and I knew these students know more about economics than I do, at least from what is written in the textbook. So I had to rethink the entire approach to delivering that class, and then started to run classroom experiments, to do case studies, to work with comic books, because I wanted to facilitate the knowledge or facilitate the access to the knowledge, to the economic theory by making it applicable to them. I didn't know the word facilitation back then. But I think that's how maybe it started. And then I was I left academia and the teaching and went into higher education strategy, and was very fortunate to be hired by uni president as a strategic advisor. And he had the vision to build the new model research university of the 21st century. And he imagined this with a bottom-up strategy process, including professors and students, secretaries, ministers and lobbyists, everyone coming together to rethink what a research university of the 21st century could be. Beautiful project. I was kind of leading it. Still didn't know what facilitation was. I was working with a coach and an excellent facilitator back then. Long story short, the minister changed. Then my boss went into burnout.
Oh, no.
My strategy and planning office was dissolved and replaced by McKinsey. So, yeah, hooray. So I had a little bit too much information and insights on what happens to an organization if first you induce this creativity and agency, and then you take it away and replace it by, oh, and by the way, here is your strategy because we have analyzed all the data.
Yes.
And to see this kind of house of cards just collapse from my perspective, I'm sure there are different perspectives if you ask different people about what has happened. So I left that job and moved to Amsterdam to redesign my life. Wanted to work in HR, wanted to work in organizational development to really see, okay, I know that companies have this potential if they just give voice to their people. And I thought, okay, I want to do that. But as a former academic, I was unemployable. I very quickly realized that nobody from HR would ever hire me. And so searching myself, I started throwing idea parties. I rented a desk in a how do you call that? In a
like a co-working space?
Co-working space. Thank you. I had a desk in a co-working space and thought, okay, put something on Meetup. Come with your problem, we brainstorm on your solution. So I bought sticky notes and Sharpies and a little bit of beer. And then people would come with their problem and brainstorm on the solution. I had my little process on how to brainstorm questions instead of solutions, because nobody wants to hear about a solution of a problem that nobody understands in the first place. And then they got so inspired by all the questions that they received and were mind blown. And And people then start asking me for advice on how to design workshops. And then I got my first gig that someone paid me $1,000 to design a workshop that he didn't even want me to deliver. I was like, wait a moment. There seems to be money in that.
People
Wait,
pay
you just had to design the workshop. You didn't have to lead it.
Exactly.
Ooh,
And
cool.
and by then I still didn't know the word facilitation. It was then I came across Priya Parker's book, The Art of Gathering, where she used the word facilitator. And then I took a sticky note and a Sharpie and wrote down, I am a facilitator, and just put it everywhere in my room and was so proud. And then I started pitching myself as a facilitator, and nobody understood what I meant. Like, oh, you mean a consultant, a coach, a mentor,
Yeah.
an advisor? I'm like, no, a facilitator, facilitate workshops. Oh,
Yeah.
people still do that. And this was then the gateway into the into the podcast. That's why I started the podcast, because I like the world needs to know about facilitation. The world needs to know about workshops. Yeah.
And did you then also discover, because this story kind of it's similar to my story on not so much facilitation, more on design thinking, sort of, that I also had all of a sudden it had language. So because so you need language so you can talk about it. So all of a sudden there's like, oh, there's a word, so you can talk about it, and then it exists. And if you don't have the word, it doesn't exist, and it's not a thing, right? But it's also what it also did was that all of a sudden I found other people who were also using that word. You're like, oh, and there's other people.
We are a tribe. I'm not the only crazy one. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But because there are lots of moderators. Right.
Yes.
And I always have to explain, like, because sometimes I got asked to be sort of a facilitator, but then they expect me to be a moderator. And then I'm an awful moderator. I'm really good. I think I'm okay as a facilitator, but as a moderator, I'm terrible because because first of all, I have dyslexia, and then they expect to be, they sit in a, whatever, in a circle or a semicircle, and then you have the marker and the whiteboard, and you go like, John, what do you think? Okay, Janet, what's your opinion about this? I see you look a bit happy or something, and then you write down what they say. And I can't because I have dyslexia. So if I get a mark, so this made me a really good facilitator, because the first thing I do is like, I'm not writing.
Over the pen.
Yes,
Here's
you're
the
writing.
marker.
Here's the marker. It's your job. Yeah, because I got really used to it because I have dyslexia. Writing down stuff in public, I am really insecure because I will misspell, everything, and then I have to Google it first, and now use ChatGPT. Like, how do you spell this? All right, and so the moderator and the facilitator, that's sometimes a bit of a mix-up, I think. So how do you now feel? First of all, I mean, there's a community that helps, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And how do you position yourself as facilitator? I mean, you podcast, yes, but what happened? Because you started with nobody was in academia, and then nobody wants a facilitator. So.
Yeah. And then I was talking to a void, and I thought, when I started the podcast, I thought I will be done after 25 episodes, because how much could you talk about facilitation in workshops, right?
Good question.
And this is 268 weeks ago. So I have recorded by now 268 podcasts.
Wow.
All with facilitators around workshops and facilitation and leadership, but always in the context of facilitation. And so I think this was my leverage. So I then unconsciously build a community an informal community with my podcast guests. So I always stayed in touch, reached out, tried to bring them together. And when the pandemic hit, I invited them to help me to organize a festival. And because on the podcast, they always told me about their amazingly creative ideas for workshops that no client would ever pay them for. So I said, okay, so it's the pandemic. We all lost all of our clients anyway. So what if we come together for a festival, you host workshops, and the only condition is that you have to do something that you have never done before.
Oh.
And that was basically the moment of birth of what's now a community that's still called Never Done Before. where we
Right.
do
Yeah.
stuff, where we just experiment with facilitation methods and ideas. Less so now than back in the days. So now it's more peer support and still quite
And
experimental. Yeah.
And this is incredible because some of the research that I've been doing is looking at how people learn this.
Mm.
And there's not a textbook, there's not a college course or say, oh, I went my major's in facilitation. It doesn't happen. It's a bit like Arna, it's a bit like you. It's a bit, okay, I just kind of stumbled into it and realized I was facilitating. Are you finding like common themes with your community? Like how did they come
Totally.
into it?
Yeah, I think I think I met one person who graduated from high school knowing that she wants to be a facilitator.
Wow.
And her mom has been a facilitator, so that's cheating.
That's cheating. Yeah, exactly. That doesn't count. No, you're disqualified. My mom is a facilitator. I don't like you.
So without cheating cases, I don't think that anyone graduates from high school thinking they want to be a facilitator. And so we all have our history, and that's why it's so beautiful, because we all bring our own ideas, ways of doing, and history and previous employments to it and professions. What I find is that most facilitators learn it by just starting it, and then they find out, oh, it's a thing, and then they start to learn more, to read more, to then eventually start a course or a certification and read more and more books. But usually we first start and then we realize, oh, something.
Yeah.
That
But, by the way, you know that because I run courses on facilitation, and those are the ones I really like the most. I really enjoy teaching facilitation. It has some, because it's so much about psychology, and it has so much to do with your own insecurities and your own personality, and it's not a trick. It has to do with you, and so I really enjoy getting people sort of in that safe space where they can just explore and try stuff out and also be challenged, really challenged, but not challenged in the sense like, oh, you don't know how to tick the box. No, it's challenged in how you respond to certain situations. So,
and who are you as a person, and how do you
exactly.
show up, and what's your how do you deal with your shit, because you have to leave it behind so that you don't get triggered by the personalities that will show up.
Yeah.
And this participant on the other side of the screen or the other side of the circle is not your mom, although you feel like a little child and want to scream at them.
Not your mom, who's also a facilitator. Yeah, it's like, because that'd be really horrible. Like, oh, mom, no, like the nightmare.
So, yeah, don't get me wrong, Anne. I agree, and I also love to teach facilitation, and I think we can become better facilitators through training. And I think training is not enough.
No,
and I
of
think
course
that
not.
if we start with training, I actually hardly believe that anyone starts with the training, because it's not.
Oh, no, exactly. The people who we teach are people who have experience, who
Exactly, and they're aware
they
that they're
stumbled
lacking
into
a
it.
skill.
Yeah, exactly. And they go like, I was so nervous, and I how to. So they need tips and tricks, little things, but also, but mainly, basically, is hearing from others, going like, oh yeah, oh, I made those mistakes too. You're like, oh, did you? Like, okay, and things like that, and saying like, oh, but you have to kind of, in your preparation, do this, or little things that really builds confidence, because it's basically confidence being yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why I like it so much, because it's the psychology behind it. It's not, and then you just have to go and do it, because there's no one who can teach you to be a facilitator, but they can help you reflect on yourself and going like, why do I respond to a situation like this? Or why am I so nervous about this? Or, hey, there are other people and they are just as nervous as I am. If I share what I feel, actually, I have a little antenna, and I feel the energy in the room, and then everybody feels it, but I have to say it out loud, and then things change, et cetera, et cetera. But it's confidence.
And to model it. Yeah,
it's confidence, and it's just go and do it. But training helps give you a little bit of a nudge So you have a little bit of a toolkit and a little bit of more confidence to go out and then come back and say, hey, what happened? Because we all need that. As a facilitator, what I really enjoyed was when I was, and so I left Design Thinkers Academy, and so I kind of restarted my life as first as a freelancer and kind of doing a lot of stuff alone. Now I'm kind of building a team again, but having no team, I thought that was really, I didn't really like that. I like to have a team because I want to come back to the sort of my company, my people, my colleagues, and go like, oh, yeah, I failed, they hated me, and when and then having people, oh, what happened, and okay, oh, I had this, come, we have some coffee, yeah, and that feeling of being supported in a network of others, and so I think we also need that kind of knowing, like, okay,
Yes.
I go out there, I take a chance, I'm up there,
Yeah.
here I am being vulnerable, but I have a
Yeah.
support network. And so your community, for instance, is also that idea of, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Totally. And so what resonates with me is, yes, we do need more than just the training and just the doing. I think we also need observing what good facilitation looks like. What I recently rediscovered is also observing what bad facilitation looks like, because sometimes we forget. And we can learn a lot from experiencing bad facilitation. Like, oh, yeah, good reminder.
Yes.
And community, yes. And then it's interesting because on the one hand, I'm building a community, and my core business is actually an agency. So I work with community members delivering training for multinational clients who need standard workshops delivered in all over the world, in different languages, different time zones. So that's the niche where I'm operating in, because I do have this. And coming back to the team, I was recently asked, have you considered building a team? It would be so much easier to run such an agency with a fixed team instead of with a community and mixing lots of dynamics up, talking about human dynamics and psychology, right? There's a lot of stuff coming together. And then I realized that the beauty of community and working with not standard teams in the context that I operate in is that everyone comes in and delivers with their heart. It's not a standardized packaged product. If you hire one of the big five consulting companies, yeah, they deliver the training workshop, but it's okay, finish the psychological safety, now doing this, then doing that. And they're like, but someone who is a facilitator by heart, with their full heart, and is not doing this as part of a job, they will do it in a different way. And you can feel the care they come in with. And now we are full circle back to this additional 5% that make all the difference. So that's then also the beauty. I realized that, okay, I'm lucky and fortunate enough that I don't have to have a team to have the same feeling of support, crying and celebrating together, and having this in a community.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm thinking of facilitation because it's usually kind of a lonely gig, right? Like it's maybe you, if you're lucky, one other, and a whole group of people, and it's just the two of you, if you're lucky, right?
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of freelancing facilitators out there. And so I think, but what you're saying, they deliver with the heart. It's not just, okay, you have to facilitate Monday through Friday, every day of the week. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that as well. So
Yeah.
it's design. To me, it's almost a craft, but it's the design of the facilitator is bringing people together and designing the space and the artifacts and everything, so people feel a certain way, and so you can guide them in a certain way, and so it's a form of design that but it's in people, and so I do think that so we talk about facilitators, sort of outsiders who come in. I also work with a lot of people who are facilitators within a company. So the topic is sometimes they're the manager and they want to be facilitators too, which is difficult because then they also kind of own there's always this struggle. And I say, maybe you should have someone from another department facilitate you and stuff like that. But anyway, my point is that the craft of bringing people together. And that's also part of the facilitative leader. The facilitator as a leader, or the leader as facilitator, that
Mhm.
you design bringing the people together, so building community, knowing like, I need that person, and I need that person, I need that person, and if I put them together, something will happen. Because
Mm.
that's basically what you do as a facilitator. You bring people together, and then energy will, emerge, content will emerge, solutions will, whatever,
Yeah.
something will emerge because you brought these people together. And
Mm.
often it's by, you don't really have a lot of say in that, especially if an outsider, they say, well, we have a team, they need to be facilitators, and these are just the people you have. But if you're inside a business and you're a facilitator, you have sort of an opportunity to say, well, actually, we need someone from HR, we need someone from IT, we need someone from design, and I'm going to put those people together. And I think so. I really love
Mm.
that kind of opportunity with that. If you're a facilitator who's internal, who has that, at least has the skill as well, but also the leadership quality and confidence, if you will, to say, well, actually, I'm gonna pull in all these people, and because I need to have a diverse group of people, and I'm really conscious about designing that. But as your community, for instance, to me, that's a similar thing. It's like you bring people together, you facilitate the sort of bringing people together, and then stuff will happen, and not
Yeah.
always what you wanted, but you will observe it, and you go
Especially.
like, right, so you go like, oh, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's always interesting, and it's always like, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. I think that is the future of organization. I
Mm.
think what build is sort of, and it's going to take a long time it's not going to replace all business, but I think let me put it in another way, a really important future of organization, it's what we've been seeing anyway, the last 2-3 decades, is network organizations,
Mm.
community organizations, a connected company, whatever name or label people put on it. But that's what you're doing. You're saying, hey, we have all these people out there. There are all these great people. I'm going to facilitate that and I'm not their boss. So I can't tell them to do exactly what I want. So I need to kind of manage them, lead them differently.
Mm.
And I think that is the future of business.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
interesting perspective. Also because I think facilitators facilitators are good community builders because they know that it's not about them, but about the community members. That makes the community strong. And yeah, indeed, the moment that the community members are aware of this, of the value that lies in the community and not the leader and what the leader provides. Because I think many join communities or because they want to follow this one thought leader or they want to learn from this person. But I think if you really step into the power of a community and see all the value through the connections and the trust that is inherently there because you're part of the same community, then the power shifts also where the member is empowered and enabled to really tap into this value by building connections, collaborating with other community members, and then doing their own thing.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. And very few, I think, see that yet. And I'm intrigued by the example you're giving with the
Yeah.
network economy and networked organization.
And I'm thinking back to like the idea of creative leadership, right? And I think facilitators are like the unsung ultimate creative leaders
Mm.
because they can, like you said, they're taking action, they're coming together in community, and they're able to see things in a different way without necessarily being prompted. And it's a tough, how do we inspire? And would I want to live I think I would love to live in a neighborhood full of facilitators. I think that would be.
Be careful what you wish for.
I think you do, by the way. The virtual space you live in
Virtual.
is
That's
full
true.
of
I was just
facilitators.
looking out my window at my neighborhood, and I was like, oh, what
Well,
would that?
yeah, but there's a really good point. I think you'll discover that in your neighborhood there are many facilitators, people who organize stuff for the
Mm.
neighborhood, for the for the street, who arrange things, who are not asked to do so, because that, to me, that's a leadership, right? So you're not asked to do it, you do it because you see something, you're like, hey, I'm going to fix that, I'm going to do that. And leaders, at least creative or facilitative leaders, are people who will do something that kind of shows to others like that there's another other possibility, another option. They show options that you didn't even consider, like in behavior or in whatever, like, oh, you can do that's a facilitator too, right? Because a facilitator makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable because it stretches sort of the possibilities of how you behave. You can behave this way. Whoa, so that's what creates it's actually the looking for sort of stretching the boundaries, which it makes it easier for you to behave differently. And so I think if you look in the street and you get to know, if I think about sort of the people who live in my neighborhood, I know a lot of people who I would call facilitators in a certain way because they kind of organize stuff, bring people together, and they would never consider that as facilitation. But I think there's organizers, there's people who organize stuff, and there's people who show up. That's how I divide the world, basically.
And there are those who facilitate stuff, because I think there's also a difference, because you can organize, for instance, a neighborhood party. So you have the shared space and you put everything out there and you distribute the invitation, then people arrive and everyone all the same buildings stay in their little cliques and talk to each other, or all the partners talk to each other. And at the end of the day, everyone ate their own food and talked to the same people and leaves. The organizer did their job. True. A facilitator creates a space that makes it easy for people from the different buildings talk to each other, and families break up and talk to each other, and people to share the food and not only to eat the food that they brought. That's a facilitative skill. And I think you can do this by saying, hey, let's play a little game, or you can do it by the way you arrange the food, or where you share a little prompt at the beginning that makes it just a little, that gives permission to share something.
Exactly. I did
a word, and hence connect people with each other.
Exactly. No, I wanted to say that this made me think of something that to me was really simple, but it had such a big effect, is that we ran a conference, and actually this year it's going to be run again, the design thinking conference. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create buddies. And so I'm just going to just going to point people to each other, just to connect people to each other. And so people you didn't know. So you had to look, so you got basically the name of your buddy, and you had to go look for that person, because you're going to do some exercises with that person. And that changed so much, because people came into the conference with a colleague or a friend or what have you, and they had to go and look for someone else, and you brought them up, and they started talking to each other. Are you this? Because I'm looking for someone, because we had a sort of a description, yeah. So, and that, yes, it's such a simple thing. And although it made it a bit awkward for people in the beginning, but they loved it, because they knew, everybody knows, like, I have the same, like, I'm socially awkward. I'm not socially.
I think most facilitators are.
Yeah,
that tracks.
That's why we're good at it, because that's something that I have realized, that most of us come from families where as children we already had to facilitate. And many of us a little bit socially awkward, so that we know exactly where friction comes in and how to make it easier.
Yeah, my wife always says, Arne, you're working with people all day, and then at home, when the doorbell rings, you don't want to open the door. Because you're like, God, I don't want to see people.
Exactly.
Like, what's going on? I said, it's different. I don't know. It's, as a facilitator, but you're saying, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. So you're saying that
we're solving our own problems, basically. And can I just reflect back why the way you're facilitating the buddy system is so brilliant, I think, because you could have done it easy that you say, okay, here's a meeting point, hold your badge or hold the name up and find your buddy. This would have been easy and less awkward. And less of the fact that you made it a little bit of a scavenger hunt, you gave them some nuggets and breadcrumbs, and then you created friction.
Yeah. It was really cool. Yeah.
To actually create the space that facilitated this connection building, because then you not only find your body, but you have to talk to all these other people.
Yeah.
So a brilliant system of facilitation, that facilitation is not always creating the easiest way to get to a solution,
Definitely.
but the most
created this other thing.
effective way.
Our common friend Adam, I actually know you through Adam because we had dinner in Amsterdam. I can't remember why.
He will be on the podcast.
So he was sort of our sort of MC kind of a guy at the conference that time. And so not everyone managed within the time they had to find their buddies, but there was we were looking for people. And so he also got the opportunity to go like, okay, who found their body? And so there was a bit of chaos. Like, okay, who are you looking for? Like, Janet, is there Janet here? Okay, you go. So he used that again to create this really interesting game of people waving their little note of like, I'm looking for this person.
Creating a sense of belonging, of safety. Everyone is taken care of. You're not alone.
Yeah, I didn't think that was going to happen. Yeah, so it's in October. So I'm not part of it anymore because I left the company, but it's in October. It's October, when you say that correctly, 10, 11, the Friday and the Thursday and the Friday of that week. I think it's the 10th and the 11th or something like that. Yeah, 10th of October and 11th of October. Designthinkingconference.com, which was my baby and I love it. But I left the company. But my good friend Jeroen is running it. So go. Yes.
An interesting story right there.
And that was one of the things that I told, because, you're bringing up, it's not always the easiest way. And that's what I would tell my students, like everything I do is intentional. And, and as a facilitator, you really have to think about all of these really minor things, because it makes an impact. So, so I was saying like everything I do when I'm facilitating you guys is intentional. And it's really, I see their little brains start working and it's really fun. Yeah.
Oh, it's on purpose?
Back to the love letter, right?
Exactly.
The minor things that make the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's fascinating. You can actually use ChatGPT to design a workshop, and at one point I experimented with this and I had it create these sort of warm-ups, these games. And I think I created like 100. Because I was like, give me 10 more, because I love it, which makes me feel guilty, by the way, because I do say sorry to ChatGPT, and sorry, can you give me 10 more? Like, okay,
can you please give me 10 more?
Please, sorry, but they're like, yes, certainly, wonderful, I will. Anyway, 10 more, and it created these games that were amazing, by the way, because I just kept going and like, oh, this is really interesting. Do that again, do that more. So it's such a great serendipity machine as well. So you can actually have ChatGPT help you with your workshop, because it can create all these options you never thought about. But again, critical thinking, hey, as facilitators. Because
I find this fascinating that before ChatGPT came, we always thought that AI will replace us in everything, but creativity, that's inherently human. Only we can be creative. And what it actually showed in your example underlines it, that AI is way more creative than we are. When we define creativity as linking old ideas in a new way so that a new idea emerges.
Yeah, but the point is that you're right. But my brain then goes like, that's interesting. So my little brain computer still needs to pick up on it.
Exactly. And this is where I want to go. So AI might be more creative than we are, but distinguishing the relevant from the irrelevant, assessing whether it actually makes sense, all these creative boosts that it came up, this AI cannot do. And I find it so ironic that we totally mispredicted. We're like, oh, creativity, that's for humans. no, creativity is great for AI, but we need our
Yeah.
critical thinking and the sense making.
Yeah, and I think we misunderstand creativity, to be honest. I think creativity is not coming up with lots of ideas. Creativity is actually I think the core of our creativity is that we are problem solvers. So, but we are also stupid. So we break things. I think the core of our creativity is that we're dumb. We break things. We drop stuff. We kind of we go like, oops, and then it creates something new where we're gonna so many innovations, breakthrough innovation. The biggest breakthrough innovations either came from accidents that we, a lot of, especially in the medical world, so many things happened, that changed our lives just because some scientist made a mistake, didn't wash his hands or something like that, or it's from war. That we need to kill as many people as fast as possible. So we kind of like, we're going to create this amazing weapon and this stuff happens. And so because we're so stupid, we are inventive and that I think part of our creativity. And I think ChatGPT or whatever AI you're using can also be stupid or make mistakes. Let me put it that way. But but it's different. You still have to recognize that your creativity is like, I see a point in this. Oh, I can use that.
Exactly.
I go like,
allowing space
that
for
is awesome.
serendipity.
Like serendipity. That's what we are. We see patterns. We recognize a pattern where we go like, that means something to me. Which, to ChatGPT didn't mean anything because there is no meaning.
Exactly. We have to find the gems, definitely. And I agree that creativity is not coming up with many ideas, but creativity is linking old things in a new way so that something new emerges. And then finding that this is a gem.
Yes. And then
That's
it's
where
an
the value
amazing
is
machine.
because I think, yes, we break things. And at the same time, we often don't dare to combine things in a new way or to deviate from how we've ever done it or
so that's what we still have to be doing, because we still have to take that from the machine and say, I'm going to do it. And then and then again, so I created all these games, which is really cool. I had 2 of them, and then I tried it on a group, and 2 failed. One was really cool, but it didn't happen exactly the way I thought it was going to happen because it did something else. But the point is that it's such a great tool, but we've had tools like that. I mean, we had, I mean, I Googled stuff before. I mean, that was also a serendipity machine. We had, we've had, so AI's been everywhere. Anyway, technology has been helping us do new things in a different way for centuries, right? So it is nothing new. It's just that it creates a moment of chaos. And I love sort of this whole idea of chaos and order. So in chaos, you become more creative, like your story of being sort of, because of the lockdowns, because of COVID, you started doing things differently because you have to reinvent stuff, and because you were all stuck and there was no clients, so you do other things. And so that creates opportunities for us people where we're like, but out of necessity and out of need. And so we're problem solvers, and we take whatever we have. It doesn't matter what it's called. We use whatever. We're like, oh, you use this, and it's fine. It's all good. And I don't know. I kind of like that chaotic bit of it very much. And I think that's also part of facilitation, that you're okay with the chaos. That if you're not okay with chaos, you're going to be so nervous as a facilitator because chaos is going to happen. But that's what you need to create. And then you need to steer it to order. And then you go like, oh, okay, enough with the chaos. And now we have to I have this other thing, and you're going to focus, and we're going to and I had this model, and I designed it in such a way that it's on the wall, and there's a tool, and there's a game, or there's a exercise, or there's a double diamond, or whatever we created with nice words and lines and whatever graphics. And then we start focusing and we become, more focused. So I believe that facilitators and facilitative leaders, I think that's the future of leadership there. It's the only thing I wanted to say. So if you're not
what else
facilitating,
is there to say?
you're not going to be a leader. That's basically what I'm saying.
You have to
To all the leaders
facilitate.
out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Waiting
right?
for the moment that facilitation becomes a subject in the management courses and the MBAs and
Yeah,
different podcast.
it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
happening. Everyone who either design thinking and service design and agile, it all takes a different management style. It takes a different leadership style. You cannot have an agile company, real agile company, without leaders who are facilitators. So, I mean, we don't have any real agile companies except for yours. Your community is a real agile company. I totally believe that is the future of companies. That's because a company is a community of people, but the system kind of restricts it in a certain way, and so it creates a culture of fear out of it because you don't really trust that system, not really, you know. But your community, that's a real agile company. That's how companies should be. That's an ecosystem. And that is also not about eternal growth, because that's not what a community is, right? It is about balancing. You need to you have a balance act all the time. And that is the skill of a real creative leader, being able to balance that and keep that community and that ecosystem alive. And, so I think, so yay to you.
Yay.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay, so we've talked for a long time and we still didn't really get to know you. This is not the conversation I wanted to have, but I think because all three of us are so interested in this topic,
Yeah.
kind of,
It was a wonderful conversation.
yeah,
And we talked about leadership. We talked about creative leadership.
Yeah.
So I hope it's good enough for your podcast.
It is, but one question
good.
I still want to ask: why Amsterdam?
Oh, I wanted to run
All
away
the places in the world. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's another place, but there's so many. London.
Because of Amsterdam. So there was a short list of 3 cities. Amsterdam was first, second was Copenhagen, and third was Berlin. Funny enough, all cities with bad weather, as I now realize.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was somehow attracted by Amsterdam. And what I love about Amsterdam, that's why I stayed, it's welcoming. It's a very facilitative city. I've never thought that thought before. But I think it doesn't judge. It accepts everyone as they are. It's very easy, especially for freelancers. And then I couldn't believe how easy it was to first become a freelancer and then to switch the freelance ship into a limited company. Suddenly I had a limited company. I'm like, but nobody tested anything.
I'm just
Nobody
allowed to do
verified. Now I am responsible. Yeah. It's a great place.
Yeah, good to know. It's my favorite city. So good to hear. Good to hear. I didn't know it was very, very welcoming because typically I come from a long line of people from Amsterdam, and people from Amsterdam, the original people were not the most friendly people. They're not the most friendly people. They're funny. They have a nice sense of humor, but very harsh, which I kind of like. So, but it's not as if they're the most friendly.
But then if you have, I lived in Paris, and I lived in Luxembourg, and I lived in Vietnam, and I'm from Germany. Amsterdam is so welcoming.
Right.
Depends on what you compare it with.
Yeah, compared to Paris, it's yes.
Yeah.
I don't know
and
Vietnam.
like what you said, like it doesn't judge people, just kind of lets them be who they are and do their thing. And there's a lot of, well, at least I'm more familiar with the States, there's a lot of cities in the States medium-sized cities that would welcome you in and be, oh, I'm super happy, but you're not going to do it exactly how we do it. Okay, that's not as awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and in Amsterdam it attracts all different kind of people. So I find it fascinating how in a museum like the Rijksmuseum, you have the middle-aged cultural couple coming for a culture weekend and visiting the museum, next to a bunch of totally stoned teenagers who walked out the coffee shop and walk into the Rijksmuseum. And you have the yuppies and the old people, and everyone is kind of brought together through culture, although they would never meet in the same space in a different part of the world.
Well, I need to go to the Reich Museum again to see that again. It's been a long time. Yes.
I can recommend it.
Yes. Oh, cool. Okay. So last question. I want to ask this last question because I want your opinion or your thought or your kind of feeling about the
Oh, yeah.
future. So, what is next for you? What are you, I mean, this sort of, are you going to continue just doing the same thing you're doing now? Or do you foresee something, or do you foresee something for the facilitators of the world, or what's shifting? What's changing?
One lesson I learned is whatever I plan doesn't work, and whatever I end up doing happened by accident. So I created a community by accident, which then turned into an agency by accident. Now we're experimenting with courses. So we're community members who are all independent. They all come. So we are method agnostic. So everyone comes not only from a different country, but also from a different school of thought. So facilitating the space where they can combine forces to collaborate and create a course together to teach externals about facilitation. That's my current curiosity. And I think there's beautiful value in it because it doesn't exist yet. If I want to learn about design thinking or service design, if I want to learn about liberating structures, I know exactly where to go. If I want to learn about facilitation, it doesn't make sense to go to one person who teaches me facilitation because facilitation is not this one thing.
Yeah.
It is everything. So this is something that we're trying to mimic. And my latest crazy project that reminds me a bit of the early days of Never Done Before is I invited my podcast guests on a project to collectively write a book. And I started with the working title, What We Talk About When We Talk About Facilitation, and inspired by Haruki Murakami's What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. And we had the first 2 gatherings, herding cats. It was absolute chaos. And after the second gathering, I realized that the book needs a different title. And I'm now landing on a practical guide on how to change the world through facilitation.
Oh, cool. That's cool. So if you want to be part of this, so, I mean, I know there's the website is neverdonebefore.org.
Yeah.
Right. So you can check that out.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a facilitator out there lonely in a corner, someone crying.
It's a paid community. It has quite a high price tag because we see it as an investment. And we have a purchasing power adjusted fee. So anyone who's joining from a country that has a weaker currency, we adjust the price according to the purchasing power of that country. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think, that sounds really, really cool. So we have to, I think, if anyone managed to get to the end of the podcast, then go to neverdonebefore.org. Check that out.
If you survive that, you survive everything.
Yeah.
And if you want more of that,
then you're a big fan, then you need to be there. So thank you very much for
thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you.
inspiring.
Loved it. Such a great conversation. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yeah. We always hope so.